Hello everybody, Dark Phoenix Ninja 92 here, and welcome to a new introductory / tutorial video that I'm going to be doing on the topic of Stellaris. Please keep in mind though, this video is only considered to be valid for 2.0 as of the Cherry update. If future updates change things so that this one is no longer valid, I will try and make an updated version of it, but I don't guarantee this. So you can only consider this version to be valid from 2.0 to 2.0.2, which is the version I'm currently playing on. But what this is going to be is me showing you some basic tips and suggestions for getting started in the game. I'm going to run it for the first 10 years and play while giving you my recommendations and explaining them. And while it will be different depending on your ethos, as a result of that, I'm going to actually do two separate 10-year things with this. One with a Xenophile and one with a Xenophobe. So we will start with the Xenophobe. Let's see if I can't find an appropriate Xenophobe. Ah, here we are. The Soul Dominion. There are Xenophobes, and I'm going to use them to show you the xenophobia side of things as far as the first 10 years and basic things to get started. Yes. Okay, so the very first thing you want to do when you spawn into the game is this. You assign your research. And which one you pick really depends on how you plan on doing things. So, in my opinion, you want to get at least one of the research facilities, and the one you go with really depends on how you're going to be focusing your weapons technology. And we'll get into the why you need these later on, but it is fairly important to have. And your research options are semi-random, but you will always, as far as I'm aware, get at least one of the research options. There's one for each category. I have only one of them as an option this time, engineering facility. You can also potentially get biolab and physics lab. And under physics, you will get the kind of energy-based type of thing, and I'm doing a shit job of explaining that. Physics is where you find things like your reactors, deflector shields, power plants, and FTL drives, as well as energy-based weapons. So, right off the bat, what you want to decide really is if your primary focus for weapons is going to be coil guns or energy weapons. Because you really want to focus on one right away and make that really, really good. And you can come back and pick up the other later, but having a primary focus will help, so you're not spreading yourself too thin and trying to research two types of weapons. There are also the nuclear missiles, but while they are technically a type of weapon in themselves, you want to have a backup because eventually point defenses will come out and missiles will be less useful until you can find a way to get around that. But right here, based on the technologies I have, my recommendation is, at least for the early game, to go for the Mass Driver's weapons. But right here, I'm not going to be following my own advice. I'm going to research the engineering facility because I want to have one of these facilities unlocked right away, and it's the only option. And as I said before, in my opinion, you really want to research one of these facilities on your first time and through. And right here, if you should happen to get farming subsidies and hydroponics farm 2 on your first biological research thing in the game, ignore it. This is not something you need right away. It's handy when you get later on and you need to start supplementing your food supply, but it's really not that relevant right away. With one caveat. If you are starting on a tomb world, then you need this because your ability to produce food on tomb worlds is shit. And until you get established a colony on a non-tomb world to be able to produce your food, you're going to have food issues. So if you're on a tomb world, then get Hydroponics Farm 2 as soon as you fucking can. Heritage Site and Pop Growth Speed are both fairly handy. You want to have additional pops growing on your planet faster. And that's especially relevant in the case of a situation like mine, where I have a lesser slave species, as well as my dominant race, both on the planet at the same time. So, both of those species will be sucking half my growth, meaning each pop will only grow at about 0.5 or 0.4, depending, every month. But heritage sites also very handy because as your number of owned colonies and systems, and I think also your number of pops in your empire grows, you will have to spend more and more unity to unlock traditions. More on that a bit later. But for right now, I feel that in the situation where you have two separate species growing at the same time at the very start, like if you pick syncretic evolution, for example, in that circumstance, I feel that pop growth speed is the better option. It will also move you down the biological ascension path, so if you later want to do genetic alterations to be able to change your species' genetics to make them better, basically, this will move you down that path. And finally, as I said, we have physics slabs. I'm not going, in the case where you're getting engineering facilities but planning on focusing down mass drivers, you can safely ignore blue lasers. The capacity overload and energy grid are very useful in this, since it's a pretty early game thing. The thing with it is, you probably want to take it fairly early, just to get it out of the way, and because it's one of those things that, at least in my experience, it tends to be very annoying when you're not able to research it as fast as you can in the early game. But it does help early on, because early game energy is something you have trouble getting your hands on, and you really need it. So being able to spend influence to get more energy and boost your planet's energy production, you really can't afford to avoid that. Plus, Deflector's level 2 is not something you need to worry about early on, and unless you're focusing on taking the energy weapon path for your primary weapon, then you don't need to go for blue lasers. Once you do that, what you need to do is go to your starbase. And you will have an open module slot. There's quite a few options. You could boost your shipyards to be able to produce more than one ship at the same time, boost your naval capacity, get some defensive weapons on your... get some defensive weapons on it to be able to fend off attacks, but this is your home system. If your home system is coming under attack by enemy forces, then something has gone horribly wrong. The one you want to go for is the trading hub. You spend 100 minerals, and it takes 180 days, but you get a +4 to your energy income. And this early on, you really want to be prioritizing and making more energy where you can. That said, you don't want to completely neglect your minerals, because as you're going to see, you do need those. And now, we take a look around the home system. As you can see, things have changed since 1.9. For one thing, your system starts fully surveyed, and for another, there's a few resources that have the mining and research stations built on them. In my case, I'm extracting 3 minerals and 2 physics here. And I have another 2 minerals. Oh yeah, and I'm also extracting 3 energy from my sun. In addition to that, I have another 2 minerals, 3 energy, and 2 physics that I could build things on to be able to get more of them. So, what you want to do here is you want to send your construction ship over, and if you should have anywhere with minerals that you can mine, do so. You're going to need the minerals to be able to build something else that's going to be fairly vital. And this early on, you want to be spending minerals to... You want to be spending resources, I should say, to make resources. Is really the best thing to do. After that, you go to the galactic map view and queue up a survey chain with your scientists to go and discover what you can find in a nearby area of space. The direction I'm choosing to go is not necessarily the most optimal, but this early on, when you own and know about literally nothing but your home system, it's a fairly viable strategy to just pick a direction and go with it. And then you don't want to unpause yet. All of this is before you even unpause the game. You'll go to Ship Designer, and you want to make some changes to your corvettes and defense platforms. First of all, you'll see your corvettes are set on the interceptor section, with 2 mass drivers and 1 red laser. You want to go to your... you want to go to this, the section type, and change them from interceptor to missile boat. As you can see, missile boat has 1 small weapon slot and 1 missile slot, as well as 3 small accessories, 3 small slots down here for additional components. You want to add mass drivers to the small weapon slot and nuclear missiles to the missile slot. And go down here, and for the time being, you go for 2 armor and 1 deflectors. You can leave the accessory slot blank for the time being, because the only thing you have access to this early is a reactor booster for more power. And you don't need additional power, you're at plus 15. Just keep one thing in mind, this configuration is really only optimal for this early stage in the game. Because later on, you'll want to change it up after your armor and shields improve. At this point, the armor is your best bet. And you don't have anything else to change out, so save your design, change the name if you wish, and move on to the defense platform. And what you want to do is change it out for 2 missile platforms. For the missile station section and the medium station section. Give the mediums mass drivers and the missiles your nukes. And you're going to give the station an equal amount of armor and shields. And save it. Now, there's one last thing you need to do on this screen before you X out. Untick auto-generate designs. Otherwise, it will perpetually generate new designs, even when you delete them. And it's just a pain in the ass. It takes up loads of space. Now, you're 5 below what you'll need for your fleet in terms of being able to upgrade it, but you want to hit upgrade anyways. When you have the minerals saved up, it'll automatically deduct them and do the upgrade. But now you want to unpause the game and bring it up to fast speed, because the early game is quite slow, and you want it to be running on fast, if at all possible. So next, as you can see, the game will generate 2 pops that are growing. And since I have 2 species, if you don't have syncretic evolution and only have a single species, it'll generate 1 pop. But they're both growing at 0.5 per month, or 0.6 per month in my primary species case. And you want to move these around to where they'll fit. And at the moment, you might be tempted to start clearing tile blockers to get access to a few more resources. Don't. Do not do this. Right now you need to be saving up your energy, because you're eventually going to want to get an additional scientist, and leaders now cost you energy. They will each cost 200 energy, unless they have a special trait that makes them cheaper, in which case they will cost 100. And now we have anomalies. This is a special case we need to mention. You're probably going to find quite a few this early on with a very high risk of failure. That depends on what their level is and what the scientist's level is. You do not, under any circumstances, want to try and research an anomaly that has a failure risk higher than 30%. If possible, you want it to be 20% or lower. The thing that you can have happen that makes that the case is that your anomalies can result in both a failure and a critical failure. A failure simply results in the anomaly going away and you never being able to do anything with it ever again. The problem then comes with critical failures, you see. Because if you critically fail, then not only will the anomaly go away, but there is a chance that your scientist will die. As well as a chance that your scientist will die and his science ship will be destroyed. So, if you take an anomaly that you're not ready for, you could potentially kill your scientist and waste 100 minerals and 200 energy credits. And here, once your construction ship is done with his work, and your nearby system is close to or is surveyed, then you need to tell it the construction ship to move there. You don't want to immediately claim the first system you find right away. I made that mistake. But there is actually one other thing you want to do. And I should have mentioned this right at the beginning. You want to go under food stockpiling and change the amount to balanced. As it's entirely feasible, you may run into a series of events at some point that results in your food surplus going negative for a while. Maybe you conquered an alien empire, and now you have about 30 of their pops sitting around. It could be any number of things. But you do not want to have to address that. And you don't want it to result in your food stockpile running out because you didn't have enough saved up. So you want to change it to stockpile 1,000 food. And now, once you've surveyed your first system, you want to wait for the second one to be surveyed, actually, before you go ahead and claim a system, because, if possible, you want to get the best bet that you have. Even though you're probably going to claim both of them, and then some, I would recommend waiting until you've surveyed at least 2 systems to start claiming them as yours. The main reason being that now influence is so valuable because you have to spend it on claiming your systems. You don't want to waste that energy. But, and I completely missed when it happened, but the moment you have the minerals to spare to build another science ship, you should, and while it's in construction, you want to straight away recruit a scientist. It doesn't especially matter which one, you just need a scientist to crew this science ship once you get it. And your science ship complete. Just assign your leader and tell the science ship you just built to start surveying in the opposite direction, or just a different direction, to the one you already have out surveying, so that you can cover as much space as possible. The only occasions when I wouldn't recommend mass surveying like this are if you're playing as a Fanatical Purifier, a Devouring Swarm, or determined Exterminators. Because all of the kill everyone type of empires want to discover races as slowly as possible, because it gives you time to build up that way. But those are not races suited for beginners, so you don't have to worry about that. But you want to start, as soon as you're able to, you want to start building a second ship, because you need to grow your navy ASAP, because at a certain point, and I don't actually know what the trigger is, you're going to get the event triggering for the existence of pirates. And once they show up, you're going to have to maintain a pretty sizable fleet for the rest of the game. But the moment you've surveyed your second system, if possible, you should choose between the two which you're going to claim first. You will probably end up claiming both, but you need to make a first choice. And for me, I'm going to claim that system. Simply because it has more minerals, and for no other reason than that, since I am going to be claiming both of them. That said, now that we're on to the subject of claiming systems, there are a few things you need to be aware of with your expansion. You do not want to be expanding too rapidly. A good rule of thumb for the rate you are claiming new systems at is if your expansion is barely keeping up, if the rate at which you're gaining influence is barely faster than the rate at which you are taking control of brand new star systems, then you are expanding too quickly. You need to expand fast enough that you can gain additional resources to support your empire, and be able to be bringing in resources to fuel your expansion, but you don't want to be expanding so quickly that you're shooting yourself in the foot. Because the number of systems you hold will directly impact your research speed. So, for example, an empire that controls 5 systems will be able to research faster than an empire that has 50 systems. That's the sort of thing I'm talking about here. But you also don't want to completely circumvent planets. You want to be colonizing new worlds when you can. And because you do still get resources from new planets. In addition to that, planets are the only places you can build civilian ships. If you want to build colony, science, or construction ships, you have to do that on your planets. Whereas military ships can only be built at shipyards, or starports if you prefer. And now, we're about 2 years in, and we have enough unity to adopt our first tradition. And it is because of the importance of planets in being able to... because of the importance of planets, and the fact that you want to have greater than 3 starports sooner rather than later for various reasons, that I'm going to recommend that you choose expansion for your first point. Your first tradition should be expansion. There are several reasons. For one thing, as you grow, you're going to have to spend more, in addition to having to spend more as you spend more. And so the first point will really help you out, being able to get +1 unity from your capital buildings, which also means that you will not have to wait until you upgrade the reassembled ship shelter to a proper colonial administration before you can get unity from it. You can get unity from it right from the get-go. And a reduction in tradition costs by owned colonies, starbase upkeep, and once you get to reach for the stars, that will also enable you to double down on your expansion a little bit, provided you have the minerals to pull that off. So, because of all of that, I am going to recommend expansion as your first tradition tree. Of course, immediately after you take it, basically nothing is going to change. But at some point you are going to get this, the Habitable World Survey, or you want to survey worlds that can be colonized. And you basically always want to say a commendable initiative, because that will give you a load of resources once it's done. Even if it takes you a while, it's handy to have. You want to go for it the moment you get that. And you also want to be constantly building new warships throughout everything, because it's basically a fact that if you fall behind in your warship production, you are screwed. That's one thing you can't afford to do, is not have enough ships to defend your borders. That isn't an opinion, it's just a fact. But at this point, once you've discovered a couple of worlds nearby, that have potential worlds to colonize in them, you want to prioritize claiming those systems. And in the case of things like this, where
Star system charted.
In the case of things like this, where there are systems that connect to those systems which you don't own, it is a perfectly good idea to claim a system in order to get closer and then be able to claim the system you actually want by spending less resources. That's a good use of your resources. I'm claiming this system because it gets me closer to the one I actually want, is a perfectly viable reason to justify expanding a bit faster than your resources would perhaps allow you to do. You don't want to do it all the time, but you can under certain circumstances. Especially since it will gain you access to colonizable worlds. Which, as I've said before, having worlds that you can colonize is vital to success. It's not really a very good idea for you to try and inhabit only a single world and just claim the space around the rest. And also, from time to time, you're going to get events like this. They're not important immediately, but they will have importance down the line. What that basically means is, once you unlock the terraforming technology, you're going to be able to turn that barren world into one that you can live on, but you don't have the tech to do that yet. As you can see, it adds the terraforming candidate trait to that, and we need the climate restoration technology, but then we can terraform that world, which will be noted under the expansion planner. It's a terraforming candidate. So once it can be terraformed, you'll want to do so. But now, at this point, once you've run basics out of influence, and you would have to be expanding a single system the moment you gain influence, you want to stop expanding and consolidate your gains and just exploit the systems you have. But you'll note that earlier I mentioned taking hold of a system that had a colonizable world in it. Those of you that have not kept up with 2.0's changes will probably be a little confused. So here's the thing. As the system is right now, you can only colonize planets that are within your borders, and the same goes for conquering primitive species. And you will likely continue doing the same
Situation log updated.
sort of thing the next 10 years. At some point you will encounter something, another species. Some will be friendly, some less so. And you'll get these special projects. One's for contact. There's likely no harm in going forward with them, because they just get you in contact. That said, there are some forms of contact you want to be especially wary of, like the one we're about to get in this system here. It's not a friendly kind of contact, let's just say that.
Tactic.
And you will start to meet creatures like this. They're not ordinary empires, these things. These are what you call marauders, and they will only show up if you have the Utopia expansion. And you will also get things like this, essentially space monsters. And in our particular case, they have boxed me in. I cannot take that route out of our space because they're blocking it, and going south we have the marauders. As a result, those kind of circumstances, you really only have one way to go, which is the way I'm sending my science ship. And we can only grow north along this galactic arm at the moment. So you want to just keep expanding and surveying in that direction to discover what's out there and claim as many systems as you can, while still exploiting the resources. It depends on your circumstances But once you're to the point we were at before, where you are expanding basically as fast as your influence gain can keep up, you want to stop and then exploit the resources in your space. You do not want to expand too fast for the reasons I've already mentioned. But you still have to expand because you need more territory and resources to be able to compete with the other empires in the galaxy, who are inevitably going to meet you at some point, and you want to be on preferably even footing with them when you do meet. And here's another thing to keep in mind. You should not be recruiting armies straight away. They're 100 minerals each now, and you don't need armies right away at this point. Just don't recruit them this early on. And this is a good idea of what you can expect when it comes to the first 10 years. It's only been 5 years in game, but it's a good representation based off of a Xenophobe empire. So you're probably wondering, why have we not met any other species? Well, that's mostly down to expansion being a lot slower. But I'm going to end this particular episode of the early game showcase video, or whatever it is I end up calling it. I'm going to end it here, and I'll come back for the next one, where we will look at the early game from the perspective of a Xenophile. And that will be the last one in the series next time, because I don't really see there's any value in me doing an early game showcase as a Devouring Swarm Fanatical Purifier or anything, because I'm not experienced enough with those playstyles to be able to give very good tips. That said, I may do one for a robot empire. Let me know what you think in the comments. So, until the next part, I'll see you then. So long for now.